Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. And once again we are taking a new video related to Azure Active Directory Beginners to Professional series. Today we are going to talk about Azure AD features. They are like MFA, SSPR, Conditional Access, SSO, all these things. As we have seen in the last few videos, from the initial where the user creation, and then we have seen the Azure AD Connect, drive registration. So all these parts we have already covered. If you have not seen that videos, you can take the link from the description box. The entire series of this playlist is also mentioned in the same description box. So you can take it from there if you want to watch all those videos. So now let's go ahead and talk about the Azure Active Directory features. So we have seen that the couple of features that we have in Azure in Active Directory, which we have on premises base, like the normal users, uh, group policies, password rules, complexity, all those are there. Even though that are same, we will be getting in the Azure AD as well. Now, what else we are getting it over here? So we can take it out a look over from this prospect. What are the other features that are supported in Microsoft Azure Active Directory? So the first one is coming. We are taking it as a password complexity rule. So the password complexity rule will ensures the password will not be guessable for anyone. Like the user can, no one can guess your passwords. How you can ensure that? You must set certain complex rule. Complexity rules are basically based on 3 to 4 factors. Like your password must have one small character or one small letter like A to Z, or one caps or a large character, that is A to Z once again, 0 to 9 any number, and one special symbols. So these are the 4 key characters categories that you have to include it. So the password complexity rules will always ensures the user must enter the combination of these 3 at least, or sometime you can also put a more restriction. It must contain a complexity of all the 4. Like it must contain all of 4, at least one character from each of them. Like if I'm putting a password HELLO at the rate 123, that can be acceptable. Still, if there's another complexity rule is not applied, the sequence. So here you can see the sequence rule is there. So that rule must not be there. So it could be like that: H at the rate L 10 hash 2. So this type of passwords you can set it up. And the password minimum requirement is need to set as 8 character long. It's a default one. If you want to increase it to the 12, sometime you can also see the 12 character long password. Some organization that believe in more restriction, they set the limit as 15 characters as well. Whereas if you are having an hybrid environment and you are using an old version of Microsoft Windows like 2012 etc., or 2012 R2, then there's a schema limitation. So you have to keep your password up to 14 characters only. So this is the one limitation as well. Still, for the modern authentications, it can be exceed, and it can be supported up to normally 256 character long passwords. So that password you can set it up as per your requirement. Whereas the second rule that comes as a password expiration. So the password expiration is a rule that ensures that your password must expire after 30 days, 90 days, or 7 days. It's up to the organization business requirement. So according to that, the password life cycle is in place, or 180 days. So normally in the organization, they prefer to use the 90 days or a 180 days as a password expiration limit. Some more restrictive organization, they prefer to use 30 days as well. So you have to update your password after that particular certain time period, like 30 days, 90 days, or 180 days. You have to change your password. There's another feature which is named as self-service password reset, SSPR. I will take this in the lab as well in more details, how the self-service password reset can work, or how we can set it up, this part. So that we will see. So SSPR is basically used to gives you an help whenever you forgot your password, you can able to reset your password without the IT team involvement. Like you can reset your password by yourself. So this is an additional feature that is offered by Microsoft Azure Active Directory as a premium services. We can say that, or we can take a long discussion once we move on this slide. We will also take another feature as independently, that is Azure AD identity protection. So identity protection, basically it's define a risk-based policies and block the behaviors and their remediations, like user behavior. Suppose you're logging on, working from one location, and suddenly you change the country, you're logging from a different country. So there are certain policies on that, like suppose I logged in from a UAE, and after a 1 hour if I try to log in from a North America region, so it will calculate on the basis of your distance. You cannot travel it from the UAE to North America within 1 hour. So on the basis of that type of situations, it will identify, okay, that this part is the risk based sign in. So these type of protections are available that we can apply and set it up in Azure Active Directory as a features. We will take this as a more discussion in upcoming slides as well. Whereas because here we are just discussing about the various protections or features that are available in Azure Active Directory, and one by one we will take it individually, all of those along with their lab implementation. We also have a password protection, that the Microsoft is having a banned password list or a blacklist of the password. So if you're trying to put that type of password, it will automatically reject that password, and you have to change the password as well. For example, if I take admin @123, that is a common one, or if I take admin, so this type of passwords are in the ban list, and you have to it will enforce you to change the password, not select this similar such type of password, which are, and the database is automatically getting updated as the common password that are available in the global banned password list. We also have Azure AD Smart Lock, that basically locks your malicious hackers who are trying to guess your user password, or we can say brute force methods that they are trying to put it up. For example, if you try to put number of passwords in the as a trial attempt, might be one of the password can be correct. So instead of that, if you put 3 password, 5 password kind of things, it automatically get locked your account. So you cannot, or someone is trying to guess that password, they cannot do it, because you have a limited attempts to validate yourself. Otherwise your account will be locked out. Whereas for some on-premises based web applications, we have a Azure AD application proxy service available, that basically helps the security provisioning for your on-premises web applications. We will take this also in the more detail in upcoming videos. SSO is obviously it's supported. The single sign-on, if you are going to use any Azure application, the SSO is pre-configured from the Microsoft. So you have to just integrate your Azure Active Directory with that particular service, and you can able to access it. Just for example, we are using an Exchange Online. For email, we are using a Teams. This is also a Microsoft service which is hosted on the cloud. So what exactly happened, once you are trying to log in on the Exchange, you can use that particular AD credentials even for Exchange, even for Teams, for SharePoint, any application wherever which is associated with Microsoft Azure, you can use the same credentials. If I publish a web application which is based on Microsoft Azure, we can also use that SSO feature, and it will help to ensure that you can able to access all the resources which are associated in the Microsoft Azure Active Directory, or we can say Microsoft Azure. So Azure Active Directory is a backbone part of all the applications identity services. We can also have a Azure AD Connect. Yes, the Azure AD Connect, that is a solution that we have discussed in the last video, if you remember. So that is again a feature which is available in Microsoft Azure AD, and that helps you to integrate the on-premises Active Directory with the Azure Active Directory. So whereas the Azure AD Connect is a complete solution that helps to set up two things. One is the cloud sync. The one part is the cloud sync, to sync your objects to the cloud, and another one is to set up your authentication strategy. So, and the third part, if you remember, we have discussed about the health monitoring, even though this is also a component. So it's a combination of three things. Please always remember, Azure AD Connect is not only used to sync your objects from the on-prem to cloud, it also helps you to set up a way of authentication from the on-premises object as well as for the health monitoring solution. So it contains these three components in Azure AD Connect. One is cloud sync, second is authentication strategy setup, and the third one is the monitoring of your or health monitoring of your Azure AD Connect, cloud sync and the other services. To set up this authentication, if you have not seen that video, you may go and watch my previous video. It's already in the description box. From there you can take it out, the details of this Azure AD Connect, as well as their installation link video is also there. Then we have a most important feature, which is called Azure AD MFA and the Conditional Access. So these are the two major components that you can use, and we will discuss it in more details in this video itself. And post that, we will take a couple of other components as well, like the SSPR, password rule, all these things we will discuss in upcoming videos. But these two sections we are going to discuss it right away. So what exactly the Azure MFA is? Azure multi-factor authentication. MFA stand for multi-factor authentication. So Azure AD or AD MFA it will add a security layer, or we can say add as an add-on section apart from normal your credentials, with two or more ways to authenticate yourself. Like normally what we are doing, we are entering username and the password. We are simply entering username and the password. So apart from these two things, something that additional we have to add it. We can discuss it in the next slide in more details about MFA and conditional access. Whereas before proceeding to the new slide, let's take a look on the zero trust concept. Microsoft security management and even all the security component management strategies always saying work on always on the zero trust model. Zero trust model says three primary pillars. One is always verify. Second is least access principles. And the third is assume breach. So it always say the zero trust model, which is always saying always depend on these three pillars and take everything under these three pillars umbrella. So what exactly happened? Always verify. You know that he is the right person. You have already authenticated them. But if that person required to access any service, you have to always re-verify them. You are the right person or not. For example, if I have given an access to one drive or one location now, and I have enabled the MFA, so multi-factor authentication. Once the user is trying to log in, I have taken their OTP. I have just sent an one-time password to their cell phone. User given that password, they can able to access it. At the same time, if I am trying to, after 1 hour, if I am trying to access another drive, then again that OTP need to be sent to validate. If I, after 1 hour, if I am going to access the same drive which I accessed an hour before, still it's always recommended you must authenticate after a certain time period. For example, if the user is idle for 15 minutes, sign out that account and re-authenticate it if it is an idle state. If you are consistently working, obviously you are logging on the same session, you are not going to uh, throw out or from the particular login activity, but still here it's always recommended go in that way. Always verify. Where is the least privilege? Whatever the principal required an access, give the same access to you. If you require a read only access, you must get a read only access only. You must not get a read and write access. For example, another example I am taking it. If I am a help desk person and I require to reset a password for the users because I am working as a help desk executive. So what happen if I give access to update your first name along with the reset password? That is not a relevant access. If you require a reset password access, just give the same level of access. Only reset password access to a specific user or a group of users or all users as per the business requirement or as per the requirement. If I require to reset a password for a department or for a country, for example, my organization is expanded in the 5 different countries, I need an access to reset the password of US accounts or the user account that exists in the US. I must not give an access to user for all the accounts to reset the password. Just give the access if the location is equal to US, then only, or a user who belongs to the US group, just give the access for those users. So this is the least access principal privilege strategy is saying. And always remember, it can be a possible breach, so you have to think from that way. It's getting breached and you have to ensure that you must have some prevention strategies to prevent those breaches. Okay, now let's go back on our topic that we were discussing about Azure AD, MFA and conditional access. So let's come to the Azure AD MFA. What exactly the MFA is? So MFA is basically helps you to secure your authentication strategy along with adding additional layer of authentication methods. There are different set of methods that are available to authenticate the user that we will discuss it. What are the other methods that are available to authenticate users? So what exactly happen once I enter a user name and the password, that is my primary credentials. Once I logged in, this is unsuccessful. Okay, you are approved to access the resource as a normal strategy. Once I add an MFA layer here, it will ask another factor authentication. What exactly the another factor authentication and what are the types are there? We will discuss this in detail. It could be a one-time password. It could be a your any USB disk or a disk that you have to attach it with your system. It could be your fingerprint, like your biometrics, retina scan. It could be a swap card that you have to swap it with your device. It could be an authenticator app. If you have a smartphone, you can download the authenticator app and provide the notification approval. So all these are the various way to authenticate yourself apart from the username and password. So this will also ensures and helps whenever you are trying to log in, you are the right person who is trying to access the resource. If someone who has taken your password, that is fine. They can able to log in it. Username and password. They enter the username, they will enter a password. But once the next step come, it will ask to send a one-time password to your cell phone number. So now you are not there, the right person. If you are the right person, obviously you will be getting a one-time password in your cell phone and you can able to add that or enter it for the authentication purpose. But someone who has stolen your password, they would not have that one-time password, and this password is one time. So whenever you receive, you have to use it in the next 15-30 seconds only one time. Next time once you try to log in, this will be automatically getting changed. Same as the authenticator app. If I send an authentication request, it will always, whenever you are going for the authentication, it will be send a new request with a new object ID, or we can say it's a new request token ID. So that token is always replaced or changed So you have to ensure that you have a right token for that time. So this will helps you to add an additional layer for the authentication purpose. Let's take a look in a more detail what we have. Here you can see there are certain ways like the authenticator app, smart card, USB disk, fingerprint, or we can say a biometrics. So apart from the username and the password, you have to add an additional layer. That layer comes as a form of MFA, multi-factor authentication layer. And once you are entering this, then you can able to access the resources, or you can say once then you can able to log in the environment. Whenever you are enabling a MFA or multi-factor authentication, there is another security factor, or we can say there's a deployment strategy. So deployment strategies is saying whenever you are setting an MFA, you must enforce a conditional access policy to ensure that it require a user group to enforce MFAs. Like if user is trying to access, I need to ensure that the MFA must be implemented. For that, I have to enter a conditional access policies. To implement it, require MFA. I have placed that policy. Whenever user is trying to access, if it is a verifying with the MFA, yes, it can able to access the resource. If it is not, then it will be getting blocked. So this conditional access policy will ensure that user who is trying to access, they must compile with the MFA. So what exactly the conditional access policies? Conditional access policies are setting up a set of rules, or we can set up a set of conditions, and you have to must validate and fulfill that condition to get the allowed access. It's working off if then else type of situation. If this one is okay, this condition is justified, approved, then only you can able to access it. Otherwise, you will be able to block. So, for example, if someone is trying to log in, user X is trying to log in, I want that user X must compile with MFA. If user is satisfying the MFA requirement, they can able to log in. If it is not, they will be blocked. So similar way, if my device is onboarded, if I'm trying to access our corporate environment, I need to ensure that my laptop must be with updated antivirus solution or updated software updates. So all these things are there, then only I can able to access the resources in my organization. There are a lot of more conditional access policy solutions are there that we can set it up. We will discuss all those other conditional access policies, even though in the next videos in the more details, because right now we are discussing mainly focused on the MFA and their implementations. So to set up that MFA, we have to configure the conditional access policy as well along with that. Second way is that as well, through which we can configure the MFA, that we will also discuss. What else and what are the ways to implement the multi-factor authentications? Okay, what are the user states? When we are talking about the MFA, there are certain user states are there. User state can be disabled if the MFA is disabled, which is up by default. So user will not be enrolled for the MSA service. Like you will not be able to access or you will not be able to be added as a MFA users. So whenever we are trying to enable a user for the MFA, we have to explicitly enable it. It would be a two-step activity. Step 1, admin enables MFA. So this one is the performed by administrator. Once it's done, the second step or step 2, user has to register. User has to register the MFA. So like I have enabled that MFA service for the user. That is one thing. Now user had to enter their set up their authenticator app. This is the one situation. set up their authentication app, or they have to add their phone number, cell phone number as a condition. So this is the prerequisite. Like whenever you are going to authenticate yourself, you must have a phone number which is registered to send in one-time password. You must have a phone number registered to receive a call to approve the authentication request, or you must have an authenticator app to get the authentication request. So this is the one-time first-time activity, and you can also ensure that the whenever user is login in the your office network or a corporate network, then only they can able to register their MFA. These kind of restrictions also can be set up. So the step 1, admin enable the MFA service. Step 2, user has to register for the MFA features at their service components for the phone calls, for authentication app, like the second multi-factor authentication strategic way. You can also, you have seen that in the Gmail, Hotmail, they also provide the same strategy where you can set up your authentication with the help of MFA or multi-factor, or we can say it's a two-factor authentication strategy. Now, there are three states. One is the disable state. It's by default when the user is not, it's not possible for the user to enroll for the MSA. Once you have an enable state, then user can able to enroll for the MFA, but they can still able to log in without MFA as well. The third situation is enforce. If you are putting an enforce situation, then user must be enrolled in the MFA, then only user can able to log in it. Otherwise, user will not be able to access it until they set up a MFA. In the enable state, they have a right. If they want to enable it, it's an optional. They want to enable it, they can enable. If they want to leave, they can leave it. For example, if we are using a Gmail account, we have a opportunity to enable that two-factor authentication. If we are not selecting that two-factor authentication, still I can able to access my Gmail account with simple username and the password. If we are enabling it, then we can the MFA feature will be available, or two-factor authentication will be available for you. But if you are in the enforced situation, then you have to enable the MFA registration process. Like you have to use the second step authentication, that is phone call, OTP, authenticator app, anything that you have to do it with the enforced situation. So that has been placed by the administrator. Whenever you are setting up this, make sure you are going with that is cloud only setup, or you have a hybrid setup. So all these things you have to consider it while you are setting up the authentication methods, because it would be totally depend on the organization infrastructure availability and the features. For example, if the cloud only setup, if you have only cloud setup, then you can simply enable Azure AD MFA from the cloud only. That can be easily accessible and workable. If you have a hybrid solution, that means the objects are syncing from on-premises to cloud. In that situation, you have to select the appropriate authentication strategy along with the, like there's hash sync, pass-through, or federated, the type of authentication that you are using. If you are using Azure ActiveDirectory domain service-based authentication with a federated environment, so that require an extra protection while you are setting up MFA, even though it's working for all. Sometimes for the legacy applications that are not supported in the two-factor authentication, then you have to use the Azure AD proxy service. We can discuss this later on in more detail. And if we have a radius protocol enable based on NPS server and the policies which were used in the earlier version of Microsoft Windows server or on-premises infra, then you have to take a little bit extra precautions that we can discuss what are the radius-based authentication with integration with MFA in more detail. But still, nowadays in the current environment deployments, NPS is not more popular now. It's only you are using an MFA with the cloud only or an hybrid environment. These two situations are primarily used. Okay, So what are the supported authentication methods? So here, what are the basic, if you see, mobile app based verification, call to a phone, text message to a phone. So these are the three primary authentication methods that we can use as a MFA or a multi-factor authentication as a second level strategy. In the app, you will be getting a notification pop up. You have to approve it, and it's a Microsoft Authenticator app which is available to verify it. It's normally work for the 30-second uh, to approve your request, and it's worked on OAuth authentication that we will discuss in more detail what exactly the request for the OAuth is. We also have an option call a phone. Call a phone that will helps you to send make a phone call on your phone number, and then you have to approve it. It will ask you press pound or a hash key, we can say, to approve the authentication request. And the third one is the text message to a phone that will send a text SMS on your cell phone number. So that will you have to give that OTP or one-time password, the text which is you are receiving on your phone. You have to enter it in the portal, then you can able to access it. Let's take a look how to enable the Azure AD multi-factor authentication. That we can take it out in our portal section. So that will helps you how to enable the multi-factor Azure multi-factor authentication or MFA. Okay, so here what we are going to see that we will be seeing how to enable the Azure multi-factor authentication. Let's move to the portal and see what we have in the portal. Okay, so you have to go to the portal.azure.com, the normal portal for the Microsoft Azure. I will show you other ways as well how to set up a multi-factor authentication for per user, individual identities, how we can do it. That I will also show you. So once you click on that, simply in the search box, the one way you can type multi-factor authentication. It will directly open the multi-factor authentication settings. You can also open it from the Azure Active Directory. Let me just click on this multi-factor authentication. So here you can see it will gives you a detail of all the multi-factor authentication strategies, where account lockouts, block, unblock, fraud alerts, or tokens. So all these informations you can see it from the left side. We will discover this settings and the options. Here you can see there's an option configure additional cloud-based multi-factor authentication settings. If you haven't configured anything, then it will be displayed like this only. When I clicked on this additional cloud multi-factor authentication settings, it will brings you a pop-up, and that settings gives you an option that's it's comes okay. Allow users to create an app password to sign in into a non-browser app. Do not allow users to create app password to sign into the non-browser apps. You want to allow it or you want to restrict it, that is the one thing. Apart from that, you can also see the verification options. Here some trusted IPs like your internal IP range, that, and also you can add it for your organization. Remember multi-factor authentication on the trusted device. If I want to skip it, the maximum limitations, I can also put it over here. Even though this is not a recommended approach, if you are putting it not more than a day or 24 hours, so that users have to re-authenticate themselves while they are setting up multi-factor authentications. Method available to users. Here you can see the text message to phone, notification through mobile app, verification code on the mobile app, hardware token. So like that, whatever you can set it up. These are the verification methods that are supported or available according to your organization setting. You can change and modify it as per your requirements. Here the phone call is you cannot see, but in the production normal, once you have a proper domain setup configuration, you will also get this option as the enable one. This is this is a test demo tenant, and it's having some limitations as well. That's why without licensing, I am not getting that option over enable here, but by default you will be getting it that. So from here you can set up the option, and how you will enable it, that we will be taking up to you. Let's go back on the portal and check it out, the set up that particular condition. So if this option is not enabled here, so you have to check those options for the verifications. This is the first prerequisite. You have to set it up. Once you do that, post that, you have to configure one conditional access policy for the same. You have to open the conditional access policies. Conditional access policies again can be opened from the Active Directory, uh, Azure Active Directory, or if you want, you can directly type it here, conditional access, and open it. So let me quickly click on Azure Active Directory from here. When I clicked on the security option, I can see the option conditional access is available over here. Once I click on this conditional access, you can see the new policy and the other policies that are available. If I have to set up that policy, once I click on this new policy, there are certain Microsoft default templates are available that we can take it out more detail at later on. Here are the type of various templates. Require multi-factor for the admins, required change password for the high risk users. So these are the predefined policies setups. Even though we will discuss this in upcoming video in more detail. So let's go back on the conditional access and set up the policy for MFA. Click on the new policy from here. This is giving you a list of options over here, or we can say the various parameters that you have to configure for the policies. So let me take first the policy for MFA. It's not cap small anything, it's just a name. You can set it up. Assignment 0 users or workload. So here what we have to do, we have to select an appropriate user for that particular account I want to set up. If I want to set up all the users, I can select it up all. If you want to put it for the specific users and a group, so I'm just selecting it for the specific users and a group, and I will be selecting few users like this one. This is my external user identity. If you we have added, if you have not seen that video, you can take it out in the first video. We have added that. So even if I want, I can select the group as well. So whatever the users and the groups I will select, I can click on select, and then this will be applicable to these users only. After that, I have to go. You can see the cloud apps or action. You need to click on this. In the first step, I have selected the user identities that I have to add it. Whereas for all the cloud apps, I want to select it for the specific app. That is again an option. We can select it for a specific application as well. Mostly all the Microsoft applications are there. It's recommended you must set it up for all the users, and that will be applied for cloud apps, all the cloud apps. This is the second situation, or we can say the actions area. If I want to select an appropriate app, what I can do, I can just go and select the Office. If I want to enable it only for the Office 365, I can set up like that. So let's take in this way. Office 365, I am enabling the authentication method for this particular user. When I clicked on the condition, here you can see there are certain device, platform, that user risk level. So that we also can select it appropriately if high user sign-in risk, if we select it high or low. What are those risk and things? We can discuss it once we move in the next next video. I will discuss all these components individually. Whereas for the device and the platform, I can also specify if I am trying to log in it from the iOS, Android devices, or any specific phones. So these type of restrictions we can also set it up or select it up. If I go to the location, I can put it a location as any location. If I want to restrict it, I can exclude the trusted locations as well. I can include the specific locations as well. Any country, any local IP locations, anything. Then client app, leave it as it is, either browser or mobile browser or mobile client. So these type of custom configuration that we can select it. But here I'm not going to specify it. I want an authentication MFA must be applicable for all the location, all the type, all the devices. Then once I go in the grant and access control, click on the access control. Here you can see the require multi-factor authentication. In the grant section, it must be there. Once I enable it, then, and here you can see require for all the selected control. So require multi-factor authentication, that must be there, then only you can able to access it. So first we have to register it, and then only we can able to log in it. So grant, I have given that one control is selected. This is the situation. Require multi-factor authentication. Select it. Here you can see the policy mode. This is one other mode important part. In the policy mode, if I select the report only, then it will just create a report. It will not enforce user to authenticate through an MFA or registration through authentication of MFA. Make sure you must select this as a on, and then click on create. So now this policy is getting created, and the users that I have selected, that must be authenticated by using this profile or policy, sorry. To test the same, we have to log in any of the user account that has been associated with this particular group policy. So I will show you and the last how we can set it up, or how we can test it up, that particular user identity which I have already selected. So if you remember, we have selected these users, specific included users, and I will select it, this one, at later on. I will show you. Before going to that testing purpose for the same, let me just show you a specific user base authentication. So let me go once again on my Azure Active Directory. You can directly type aad.portal.azure.com. That will open the Azure Active Directory portal. If you have not seen my last videos, you can check it out from that series. We have discussed about this part, what are the URLs that are used in Azure Active Directory, as well as the Microsoft Azure and all. So once I click on the users, I have another way to enable the user. For example, this is iTest1. If I want to enable that particular user for MFA, I can see there's a per user MFA option is there. So that is one way. Here you can see the per user MFA. When I click on this per user MFA, that will be enabled for authentication for specific users as well. Click on that. Click on this enable option. So it will enforce the multi-factor authentication. Now you can see it's enable, and from here you can also see it's enable or disable. The user that you have associated with the conditional access policies, that will not have that will not be displayed over here, but the user wherever you are enabling by your own, like as a per user authentication, then it would be enabled for individual users. So always remember, these two are the way. Through these two ways you can enable authentication for multi-factor authentication for the users. If I go back on the Microsoft 365 portal, that is your Microsoft 365 admin center, If I go there, okay, it's enabled for conditional access policy. That's why you can see I need to set up this, and then only I can able to request it. If I select another option, it will ask you to send a verification code, and then only I can able to access it, because I have enabled the multi-factor authentication. So let me just go back on the portal and disable it first. For the users, because this is then again part of this particular content marketing group, so that's why including it. Let me refresh the page. Or let me just first try to show you how we can log in it with the user identity, that is my LN, sorry, LX, which I selected as a user for the authentication MFA. So let me sign out and then sign in once again from that particular identity. This is my user identity, where for the same I have enabled the multi-factor authentication. So let me reset the password first, because I do not remember that password. Okay, signing out and then trying to access the office.com as a portal. You can see more information is required to keep your account more secure. Once I click on next, LXW for the same account for which I have placed the multi-factor authentication. Now you can see the my sign-ins.microsoft.com, the portal is launched, and now it's asking up to set up authenticator app, or if you do not have a authenticator app, so you can set up a different method, whereas you can select the phone, which the options that are published. So right now these two options are published for the my organization, or this is the test and organization. So any of these two options I can select it up. I can phone, and I can just enter the phone number. It will send a confirmation code, or it will ask you to set up authenticator app. If I select authenticator app, you have to download it in your cell phone, and then you have to click on the next. Set up an account. You have to enter the account details in your cell phone for the authenticator app. Once you set up that, you have to scan this code in the cell phone, and once you scan it, you can able to set up the multi-factor authentication. So once I select it up, then I will click on the next. The approval request will be sent to the phone number, and I have to approve that request, then only I can able to log in it. The next time whenever I'm trying to log in, it will send a notification pop up after successful username and the password authentication, and then I can able to log in. So this is the way you can set up and configure the multi-factor authentications. I will be covering up this part, some other parts later on in the more details as well. What else, like the SSPR configuration and conditional access policies. What are the additional authentication methods that are supported and available? So that things we can take it out in the next video. So if you have not subscribed this channel, you can subscribe it to watch the complete series. You can check it from the description box. The complete playlist as well as the next and the previous video links are also there. So you can take it out from the same. It's in timeout after 30 seconds. You can see it because I haven't set that in my cell phone. So thank you so much for watching this, and I will be giving the next part for this series soon. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe it this channel. Thank you so much.